Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us this Saturday, the 14th of February. This is Cerberus at the Gate with myself, Timothy Knight, André Meloche in the top corner, and Peyman in the other top corner. Peyman Askari, who many of you know from his several adventures on other channels and shows as well. Today's topic is going to be Tumbler Ridge. And I will reserve comments for later. I'm hosting, I'm kind of new at it, so expect this to be different. I give the floor to Peyman at this time, and he'll carry us into the show.
Tim, this might be your first time hosting, but we're expecting nothing less than perfection. We're going to be grading you at the end of the episode. Hello everyone. It's a shame what happened. I mean, there's no other word to use than tragedy. And Andre and myself, Tim, will go over what we think about everything that happened and where we go from here. I guess our sympathies with the family of the fallen. It's got to be horrible, horrific, horrendous losing a child. So, with that, I'll hand it over to you, Andre.
Well, first of all, thanks, Payment. Yes, all the condolence to the family, and also the fact that we try to moderate ourselves in this time of, I would say, darkness, sad time, and maybe we can discuss more rationally about what happened without undermining the pain of the families. It's sad time for Canada, but I felt for many years that we were going toward this era, and maybe we'll try to find a way to propose not only hope but pragmatic solution to the actual situation. Tim, maybe you can say a few words about what happened.
Well, as a father, I'm beyond furious that the moderates and the right wing in this country were satisfied to let this come to a point where this type of catastrophe could occur. Nine children are dead, and 12, 13, 18, and 19 years old. How do we wrap our head around this kind of a catastrophe, knowing that by not being involved, we permit this type of thing? And where do we go from here? So, really difficult to put it into words.
I just want to say, when this happened, I've seen this happen before. When there's a tragedy and people they want to get the story out first. You know, they want the impressions and the clicks. And I told myself, like, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to observe. And I've been observing. And this is going to sound really bad, but it's almost like nobody really cares about the families. They have to, it's a lip service at the beginning. This are, our thoughts and prayers with the families. And then immediately they default back to their political position. So on the right, they came out with fury at the trans agenda, and we can discuss whether that was legitimate or not. And then that was the right, and then the left used that to say, see these far right extremists, these MAGA transphobes. They're trying to blame the trans community, even though they constitute almost none of the mass shootings. So that was the narrative that was forming. And the entire country is getting swept up in this. The Truth and Integrity Privacy Commissioner, I don't know, they're just making up these titles at this point. She came out, she gave a statement, and she said, hearts and prayers, the family of the fallen, this is horrendous. And then immediately she transitioned, if I can use that word, into her political agenda, blaming straight white males. She called them cisgender males. So this country's a powder keg, and I don't know where we go from here.
Well, what you're mentioning is the lack of empathy. For many, many years, I was not on social media. And when I was witnessing an event like this, and I was not watching mainstream media, and I was always surprised of the reaction of people, especially with a tragedy like this. Usually, the family or people who are hurt, they want to be left alone. They want to be able to understand what happened, and that's a psychological behavior or reaction. The lack of empathy means, like you said, Peyman, going back to your political agenda. I tried to avoid this for many years. When it happened this week, on social media, people, they are very fast to react, and I saw many reactions, and we are drawn into this. We are drawn into the event, and because we're emotional, like Tim mentioned, children were killed, and what does not surprise me is the how the mainstream media covered it, the police covered it. We understand it's a cover up. The way they were painting, the far right, they always use the same expression: MAGA, far right, extremists. Why not terrorists? It's the way to antagonize people shows a lack of maturity in a society. And I think that many people are not aware that, including me, including myself, are not aware that when we react like this, we're not helping. This week, a lot of people comment on that. The reaction was overwhelming everywhere. Nobody pays attention to, just calming down the game and not forgetting that there's a lot of ideologies behind that. And we can talk about gender ideology, which is an ideology. It's not based on fact. So the victim is the entire society. We are all victim of this. But if you have a victim, you have perpetrator, you have people who are responsible. Most politicians today, I will not say all of them, but most politicians, they will follow this type of ideology, which is not based on biology, which is not based on what is it, future, our future, or our children. A couple of years ago, I told my daughter, who's 38 years old now, and I have a granddaughter that is 7 years old, and we were having an argument about gender ideology. And I say, what you will say if your daughter arrives at 7 years old and say, Mama, I'm a boy? And she was so angry. I just said, don't expect this possibility that this possibility will not touch you. And she was very angry. But I said, think about the future of your child. This is where we are now. And I think we're all responsible, because if we don't talk about it, the situation will not improve, in my opinion.
Peyman?
So you don't want to comment? I guess what I was going to say is when the Cowichan land ruling happened, that's the one where they took people's lands away, so it was a private property theft. People were activated, and they for once they stood up, Canadians, and that lasted for a couple of days, and then they went back into their slumber. Fast forward a few months, and then this tragedy happens, and a lot of people were activated in Canada. A lot of them stood up, and this speaks to the fact that people are angry about something, and it's been building up and building up. It's like a pressure cooker. Now, I don't think it's going to lead to anything like a revolt in the streets, but we'll see. But my question is, what happened? What's the next thing? And how many more iterations of this can there be before it leads to something violent, like a violent clash out in the public?
The Tumbler Ridge is a small blue-collar community, and this is the type of thing you never expect to hear happen in a small blue-collar community, but it tends to be a small blue-collar community when it happens. The failure of every institution involved and wrapped around Jesse is astonishing, because I wrote an article, it's on my Substack, and I called it Sacrificing Innocence on the Altar of Soji Ideology. And this is what they've done. Federal government, provincial government, Ministry of Education, the police force, medical, social workers, the entire system that said, give us your children as wards of the state. We know how to raise them better than you do. And then open onto them this Dr. Moreau experience and turning children against themselves with these sexual social engineering programs. And you have a young boy who's been in this miasma for 6 years. 6 years of medically induced psychosis and mismanagement and mishandling, social pressure, emotional pressure to maintain this direction so that some ideologues can say, look, we are a success. This is horrendous. It has to stop, and it has to stop now.
Andre.
Andre?
You said a success. In my opinion, when we think about what happened and you talk about this young man, I wrote an article. The title is Progress and Evil. And I was saying, I was struggling with the title. Is it progress and evil or progress is evil? Violence is part of our society. It's always there. But we usually delegate the violence to the institution so they can not necessarily manage, but organize the structure of violence, judiciary system. And I think that the institution, actually, the Canadian institution, did not fulfill their duties, starting with politicians in the parliament, but also with all the structure of society. And we comply to this because the RCMP, I think it is last year, when there was a transgender, what I call, and I would put it behind quotation marks because I just don't use this expression anymore. Some people will call me a transphobe. It has no impact on reality. The big problem is that we comply to this PSYOP. The sad part of it is that you have 10 people who died and young people. It's over, and their parents will be living with this tragedy for the rest of their life. You cannot expect to treat your future, the future of a society, like this. If you do this, I'm sorry to use a complex word, but it is nihilism. We are destroying ourselves from the inside, not only socially, but I would say spiritually. We do not understand many people do not understand what is happening right now because they rely on social cultural war. My opinion, it's not only cultural, it's spiritual. We lost our soul for the benefit of an ideology that is called progress. And if we don't go back to something that is more close to natural law, it will increase. Those events will increase, sadly. And what will happen, I will remind people that in 1989, there was the Polytechnic massacre in Montreal. Politicians every year, they still use this as a weapon, not permitting the family to make closure with their loss. And this is maybe what I'm afraid of, what happened in Tumble Ridge, maybe will be used again as a political weapon. We saw all the prime minister go there. We were, okay, the gesture is okay. It is, but I'm sorry, they're arsonists. They create this structure, this system, and all the society complies, except a certain percentage of the population and families, parents. I'm pretty sure a lot of parents, they say, as long as it doesn't touch my family, but it does. Board school board, it is everywhere. And those children today, they will not be there anymore. This is something that we really have to talk about openly, rationally. I hope it is possible.
So like to thank those of you who are restreaming. And I'm new to this whole clicking on the right name stuff. JT, Clown World, Squirrel Nuts, thank you for restreaming. Push it through. We got 39 viewers right now. So everybody push it through on your channels and let other people join in on the conversation. Peyman, what would you like to move on to at this moment?
So, Andre, I think you're right. It is a spiritual issue. And I did a live stream with Nico Lagan this morning, and we were talking about how nobody voted to leave Christianity, but it's happened over the years. And if you look at Mark Miller and all the people on that side, they're coming after Christianity, they're coming after the Bible, and they're labeling it hate speech. The reason they're doing that is because the Bible preaches a traditional family, like a man and a woman. These guys are progressing to something that's going to end up in transhumanism. But right now we're at the, transgender level. So they're trying to obliterate that. What the left is trying to do right now is they're doing narrative control. They're trying to take control of the situation and downplay the impact of transgenderism and what happened. Again, I don't want to dance on the grave with these children, the families are grieving. I get it. They might think that this has nothing to do with transgenderism. That's their choice. But the optics, like, they're basically lying to people at all levels. The RCMP comes out and says it's a gun person. And people are like, I'm sorry, who voted to change the English language? The RCMP is saying that it's a man in a dress. And people are like, what do you mean a man or a woman in a dress? That doesn't make any sense. They said nobody says the shooter is a man in pants. There was a whole bunch of other ones. The Truth and Integrity Commissioner, I mentioned that. Just recently, last week, the Conservative Party convention, they voted to affirm Bill C-4.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these things are happening. Everything that's going on in the schools for the past 10 years, they've been telling people, sit down, shut up. You're a far-right extremist. And it's a pressure cooker. At some point, it's going to blow.
You mentioned something important, damage control. When your narrative is not based on truth, or if it is based on, like I say, an ideology, and I insist on the word ideology, you always have to make damage control, because you drift away from reality, and the reality is there. You mentioned transhumanism. I write about this since 10 years. 10 years ago, when I was starting to understand what was happening, and I was warning people, the prefix trans means to go through. To go through means go to one side to another, the fluid society. A fluid society, you don't have the time to stop. You don't have the time to meditate. You don't have the time to rest. Children, they don't have the time to grow. They don't have the time to have fun, study, and slowly arrive at teenage age and discover sexuality and discover a new form of human being. Today, it's everywhere in kindergarten, and when I see this, it is not surprising to see some young people like this young man, and Tim mentioned it, they are on very hard drugs. I think you remember, you had Dr. Silvestrovich, he talked about it. We had Dr. Silvestrovich on the People's Parliament. This is child abuse. It is, and if we refer to the United Nations 2030 agenda, or if we refer to the United Nations sustainable goal, when they talk about children, they are failing miserably to protect children. And it comes from the top, and after that, it is implemented at a national level, at the provincial and municipal level, in the school board. And where does that stop? It ends up in a tragedy like what we witnessed this week. And sadly, I just hope, I pray for parents to just stand up, protect their children, go to school board, and not necessarily. I will not use the word challenge. I will say debate. Debate, bring facts. This cannot continue like this, because our children are in danger.
Well, I'd like to bring up a couple of comments and questions at this time. We're at about the 22-minute mark coming in. Peyman, would you like to respond to Freedom's thoughts here?
You're the boss. In fact, I am still the owner of this account. I'm going to put you in the
You
middle.
all still owning it. So, okay. So myself, the word sacrifice has many meanings and implications. Like I said, the article I put on Substack this morning is sacrificing into innocence on the altar of Soji ideology. And in a way, this is an extension to the article I put out a month or so ago regarding abortion, which was a speech that I'd written when I was a teenager. We called it the sacrifice of the innocents. And there's no idea, there's no question that we're talking about a sacrifice, and not merely in the physical sense. Yes, in the physical sense, because we are making eunuchs out of our children. Right? You are literally dismembering your children and putting them on the altar of Moloch in order so you can have your hedonistic pleasures and go about your way, because God forbid a child get in the way of your ideology. So yes, we are absolutely sacrificing them, not merely in the metaphorical sense or in the spiritual sense, but now we're doing it in the physical sense. So yes, 100% I agree with that statement. We have JT brought up a question about progressive, and that was response to André. What do you think about the issue of identifying progressiveness and the way it's being applied in our culture today?
Well, I've referred to this in my article, progress and evil. And GT is right. I refer about, child mutilation. And when we think about the way people are not antagonized, they are isolated. Single mother, single parents, we're all isolated. We're considered like, dispendable. And today in our society, because it's an individualist society, it's very hard to reconnect with people. And we saw the episode with the COVID mandate, how we were, separated and marginalized. And the concept of progress should be to unite people, unite families. I think Peyman mentioned it. The attack on the traditional family means a father and a mother. Two different people with two different psychology, with two different behavior, and this creates harmony for children. When you have a single parent mother or father, which is maybe less frequent today, you arrive and you have a structure that is a family structure that is not balanced, and the mother has to compensate with the role of the father, which is very, very difficult, because you have to comply, you have to work, you have to take care of the children, you have to act as a mother, but you also have to act with authority. What surprises me is we see many, many people, and essentially a lot of women, older women, 40 years and more, who are advocating for this, while they're mother, and they do not understand the damage that they're doing to the next generation. Maybe not their children, but the next generation. Tim, you're a grandfather. I'm a grandfather. My granddaughter is 7 years old. You think I don't think about this every day? Because I tell myself, what will happen when she will arrive at 10, in 3 years, for example? Mm-hmm. It will, if we don't do nothing today, all the children today are in danger. And we have to discuss about this. And we have to make sure that politicians know that we know. We say all the time, we know that you know. It was Solzhenitsyn who was saying this. Yeah. They know that we know. And I think they know it, but they play the game.
Yeah.
They were opportunists. I go back again to Polytechnic 1989. They still play the game to not only to disarm people, but not only with weapons, but with psychological tools. We don't have those tools to fight back the massive propaganda. The way the RCMP treated the event was disgusting. The way that the mainstream media, Radio-Canada, CBC, the way that they treated this event is disgusting. It's not even funny anymore. It's not even propaganda. It's weaponizing the event. And this is very damageable for the family first, and for the family that lost people, but for all the families in Canada.
I just want to add, I've been thinking about the word conservatism, not the party. Like, what does it mean to be conservative? Nobody really defines it. To be conservative, it's almost like you attack ideas that you don't like. So having more than one wife, for example, that's an idea that we don't like here in the West. So we attack it, and by attacking it, you stand up for what you believe in. Your form of life is what I'm talking about. So that's conservatism. Like you have the courage to fight off what you don't like. And then progressivism, it's not that you're fighting off what you don't like, you're just progressing. So the gentleman before said castrating children is not progressive. It is, in the sense that it's not about progress, it's about change. So progressivism, you have no end in sight. You're just changing. Your only goal is to change. I think in academia they call this endless revolution. But conservatism, when they say like these are knuckle dragging cavemen, women barefoot in the kitchen, no, it worked. So we're going to argue and confront ideas that we disagree with.
Yeah. Yes. And in recent experience, we have trustees, teachers, bureaucrats, healthcare workers who have stood up against this all across Canada, and they have been mercilessly crushed by a system that is entirely committed to not merely promoting, but enforcing this sexual orientation, gender identity indoctrination, this ideology. Here in my town, at the school district, it's entirely ensconced and fixated on SOGI indoctrination at all levels across the entire school district. We have men and women that I've known who are school trustees. I've been involved with them at times in their campaigns and whatnot, and they are of a more conservative Christian mindset in attempting to put enough people into the seats at the school board with the trustees that they can counter this damaging material from making its way from the provincial government down into the schools themselves. So the trustees they're either a gateway, or like they're a closed gate or an open gate, and they've been an open gate for a very long time. So we have Daryl Ferguson, Barry Neufeld, Heather Moss, Richard Prosey, Lori Thronis, right? And Barry Neufeld has for 7 years been in court, in and out of court, regarding human rights complaints against himself and whatnot. And the others have also been persecuted in the media and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. People like this across Canada who have stood up and quietly done the best that they can are being crushed, and they're being crushed publicly, and the silent majority is doing nothing. And that's what angers me the most. Despite people throwing themselves on the barbed wire and making the way for us to move forward, we do not move forward. We don't see the sign. We don't support these people. We don't give them, and we don't push forward. And either we don't have a strategy, or we hope that if we turn away, we close our eyes, it'll go away. And that's my frustration, is despite the heroic efforts of people who have given their actual their privacy, their lives, their comfort, their money. They've been dragged through courts for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Despite all of this, it appears that they've done it for nothing because Tumbler Ridge has happened.
Well, it is not for nothing, but you're right when you say they are crushed. I will go back to my personal experience with my daughter. My daughter, she's a teacher for primary school. So she teaches for children from 5 till what, 10, 12, before high school. And when I wrote to her and I told her about what will you do if your daughter tells you that she's a boy, she didn't like it. And I understood something. I think she disagrees with it, but she complies because she's a public servant. She's a teacher in primary school. And the fact that I started to talk about the problem or the what was coming was conflictual for my personal family, for my family. And I understand many people today, they do not want to rise up. They do not want to speak because, like you mentioned, Tim, they're afraid to lose their job. They're afraid to be crushed in public, which is, I'm sorry to refer to this, but it was the modus operandi of the Judeo-Bolshevik. And when they were catching a dissident, they were forcing the person to confess publicly before shooting them. We're not shooting people in Canada, but we're punishing them with fine. They bring them to court. Some people are aggressed physically. And this is where I see that there's a part of this society that does not have any maturity, how they react, when they go in a protest or they react. It's amazing. And it is accelerating. My hope, I don't want to go toward major conflict or civil war, but my hope is that when it will be dark enough, people will search for the light, and maybe the light will be spiritual, saying, what do I do now with my children? How can I help them flourish, evolve, especially flourish in a society? If they are constantly targeted, you cannot rest. Peyman mentioned something important, the fact that the progress, the idea of permanent revolution, you cannot be in a permanent form of progress. Children, they progress. They learn, they play, they evolve, but they still have to sleep at night. They still have to peace of mind. The only freedom that we have is when we are children. Because after that, when we enter in the adult world, it's a struggle. And we have to protect them, because if we don't protect them from the childhood until they're teenager and they start to take their own decision, they will be like this young man, completely lost, and they will react. And this is, it's episodes of psychosis because they're heavily medicated. This is the system needs to be not only reformed. We have to question this. Do politicians, will they do it? I hope so. That's an appeal that I ask them. Maybe you start to talk about this seriously.
That's a good lead into a question from Freedom Conversation for Peyman.
Yeah, I saw that. And the only way I can answer DEI nepotism, I did a live stream with Luc Saborin, who's CBSA internal whistleblower. And he's the one that he's the one that made the link. What's happening in CBSA, Canada Border Services Agency, after 9/11, they quickly spun this department up to take over immigration, but they didn't really do it in a proper way. It's not like the military where there's integrity. So people are hiring or promoting people based on, well, this guy scratched my back. And what I'm saying is DEI is sort of a form of nepotism. And with nepotism, you have to know the person But with DEI, you don't really know the person, but because you're giving them the position, they're going to scratch your back.
Yeah.
Can I?
And
I just wanted to.
Yep. Go ahead.
I wanted to respond to what Andre and you said. You said, you gave the analogy you've given before of throwing oneself on the barbed wire, but nobody else supporting them. Amy Ham is a perfect example of that.
Mhm.
She owes like $90,000 to the College of Physicians or sorry, nurses.
Mm-hmm.
Andre mentioned that his daughter, she sees what's wrong, but because she works in the schools, maybe she doesn't speak up. I'm going to leave the Tumblr thing. We're too close. Two things have happened. One was Cowichan land ruling, and the other one was, Andre, you might not remember this, in Vancouver on Granville Street, a Calistani East Indian guy stabbed a father in the neck or in the heart, and he bled out in front of Starbucks. With Cowichan, somebody asked that guy that got his land stolen from him, do you think, what are your thoughts on the residential school hoax? And he said, oh, I don't want to get into that right now. With the man that got killed by those Calistanis, if you went to people and you say, maybe we should stop immigration, they'll say, oh, that's racist. Like, they see the problems, but it's more important for Canadians to be nice, to be good people and friendly than to protect their children and their loved ones.
So isn't this fear of the gulag? Right?
Yeah.
Like,
punishment. Punishment.
Right? Yeah, you say something out loud and Facebook flags you for the 17,000th time, and before you know it, FinTrack is cutting off your bank account. I was going to say, is that where we are? But we just got to look back 5 years, 2 years, right, to 2022. It is exactly where we are. That's already behind us, right? These things that we say, what if this happens? They've already happened. They've already happened, and people continue to keep their head down and their mouth shut because the fear is real. And when we talk about the end of the episodes, we say, you must strengthen your family, you must fortify, you must, support your own selves and prepare, so that, because that's what the enemy is after, right? That's what the government is after. The state wants your children separated from your traditional structures. The state wants Brave New World. The state wants its little worker bees to pay their taxes and consume their toys and their Pfizer medications. The state wants this, and they're satisfied to continue to enforce it, even at the expense of innocent children. And that's a heinous crime. And yet, well, I don't know, maybe after this week there will be a change. I said to somebody earlier, in my mind, this has the potential of becoming Canada's George Floyd.
Maybe, but you need political leader, and maybe that's a message for them, but not only for them, for the entire society. When this happened this week, when I saw what happened, because most of the time I'm disconnect from social media, maybe less today. I went to bed and I told myself, okay, you will have parents tomorrow morning that will wake up and their children will be gone. How do you think you can sleep with this? And this is a message for all Canadians. Think about it. If it happens to you, what you will do. The question is not to attack people. The question is, can we unite over life? Which means if the structure of the family helps people have a stable life, something that is not always rock and roll, because children, they need stability. If we can start to appease the conflict, and that's maybe what I'm trying to that's my message, trying to appease the conflict. I know it is difficult. I know it is hard. Some people, they always use the expression far right extremists. Some people, they react in the extreme. You ask them and they cannot sustain a rational discussion. That's a message for politicians, but for the entire society. Think about your children.
Peyman, earlier you brought up C4, and JT has a segue to that. Would you like to expand on that a bit?
I believe Jeff Evely, when he says he's explained clearly the consequences of the CPC's decision, we know that Pierre knows, yet on it goes. So I saw that. Jeff Evely said that he was in Iraq. He's a Canadian Air Force veteran, Canadian Armed Forces veteran. And he had to sneak out of Iraq or Afghanistan to come back to Canada because somebody was reaching out to his daughter and saying, "Hey, do you want to transition, little girl?" So he had to sneak back to Canada. That's what he's talking about. Bill C4 is horrific, and the reaffirmation of it in the last Conservative Party convention is even worse. It's like spitting in people's faces. I was talking to Dominic Chinelli. He's a big independent guy. He's leading up BC Prosperity Project. And he said, it almost seems like the Conservative Party is trying to destroy itself. Like they are moving more and more to the left at a time when the country's pissed off. And they're attacking anybody in the party, anyone in the party, their own membership, that's saying we don't want this. And they're paying influencers to label them as far right. Now, this might have something to do with the Alberta independence movement, where they're panicked that if Alberta leaves, they have to close the party. But this is the exact wrong thing to do. And Tim, you mentioned earlier, this might be the George Floyd moment. I don't know. Maybe it is, but if it is, and Andre is asking, there's no leadership. Well, the Conservative Party is going in the opposite direction.
Yeah. You have anything to add, Andre?
No, I think on Bill C4, I think it's quite clear. And like I said, is there any statement or is there any leader that will be reasonable? I'm sorry for the Conservative Party, but they always use the expression the common sense.
Mm-hmm.
The common sense, for example, biologically speaking, it's based on fact. It's not based on ideology. The gender ideology, which was created in 1980, 1998, something like this, by Judith Butler in United States, as I'm sorry to say it, has infested all Western societies. The problem is that all those minorities, and you mentioned what's his name, George Floyd.
Yeah.
I think we could refer to Omar Kader, the child soldier. Children today, they're used as weapon. Yeah. Minorities are used as weapon. That's why I say sometimes you see some individual, they react very aggressively. They're not even aware what they're doing. They think that they're fighting for the cause of the LGBT community or the trans community, and they have no idea that they are manipulated. They're manipulated by their emotion. They cannot react. That's why you cannot have discussion with them. You cannot, because they will just scream at you, and they are. That's why I refer to a child soldier of Omar Kader. Today, all those lobbies, they use minorities, and the worst of it is our children, because they're vulnerable, they're naive, they're pure, they're still new. You can mold them, you can create something that is completely different. And we see what is happening with double mastectomy. And so I'm sorry to say it broadly, but it is something that is happening today, and it can happen to any child in Canada. And I'm really concerned about this, and I'm ready to discuss about this, but we have to discuss on reason. You cannot discuss on ideology.
There was I believe Argentinian educator, I cannot remember his name, it begins with the letter P, Marxist educator, who built the principle that we're seeing today that turns into Soji in his early work. And the end goal of Marxism in the curriculum is to turn children against the other generation, right? So that
exactly
to destroy that generation, to revolt against that generation. And they're literally turning children into activists. They're not turning them into citizens. They're turning them into activists and agitators, because they've got that generation, and that's what they're going to do. What I find is there's an interim level that people aren't really paying attention to, and that is the parents who actively and aggressively and like screaming banshees defend this view. and defend the ideology and foist their children, and I call it foisting their children up onto the altar and slaying their own children on the ideology in order to consider themselves approved. This is a gross example of Munchausen's by proxy, right? A very public example of intentionally, willfully causing your child harm in public to receive the accolade of your peers. And now they're doing it in public. Once upon a time, Munchausen's was largely done in the quiet, in small groups, where a parent would intentionally make the child ill, so that when they brought the child back to good health again, their peers said, "Oh, what a good parent you are! What a good parent you are!" Now this is happening. This Munchausen's activity is happening in the open. In the open. So when some parent accuses you of being a transphobe, this is what they're doing. This is exactly what they're doing. And so the children are victimized at absolutely every level. And even if the number is small, those screaming cows are loud enough to make it sound like it's drowning out the whole room. And then the media supports that. And this, it has to stop. It has to stop. And the silent majority needs to speak the fuck up. I don't care if you have to go down, and protests are valuable and they're important. But you literally need to put good people into office. You need to get off your butt and go out there and make sure that you put good people into office. As much as there is a lot of anti-political sentiment out there, unless you're going to do pitchforks and torches, this is the only means we have available to us, right? So it's from this point, I just get political.
They've broken up the family unit and they've damaged it so much. So now we're a couple of iterations down and we have bad parents. This is the abdication of parental responsibility. As a parent, you're supposed to protect your kids. Now they're directly, indirectly harming their kids. So we have this scenario where we're not just fighting the state, we're fighting these idiot, unqualified parents, right? So that's a problem. But Tim, you mentioned something else, or maybe it was Andre, the child soldiers. Like, look at what happened in Lethbridge. Pure anarchy. Like, Francis Whittleson went there to talk. I'm surprised they didn't lynch the poor woman. If you look at what's happened with Tumblr, there's an activist by the name of Rachel Gilmore. She's just an absolutely vile woman, and she's coming
Screaming
out.
cow.
Yeah. Well, I was putting it a little bit more delicately. But she's coming out and she's saying anybody that disagrees with these people is trying to do harm on transgender people. Yeah. The third thing I'll say, the most evident one, is what's going on in the US right now, where it's lawless. Like these kids think that acting in this lawless manner in defiance of people, police officers that are acting lawfully. This isn't like Ottawa. Like this is the legacy of Obama, because he was a community organizer. He's just unleashing these children to cause chaos.
I think the reference to Obama is accurate. Think about when we see those children. When I was saying they're weaponized, they are. The generation that will, have no boundaries. In Quebec, we have Bill 15 that was voted, I think, 2 years ago. This Bill 15, it gives the government the power to take out your children if you disagree with gender reorientation. And that was voted 2 years ago unanimously in the National Assembly. You say, is there any conservative movement in Quebec? And I'm like, sometimes I tell myself, if it is like this in Quebec, which is, Quebec is what we call progressive province. And I was expecting that the rest of Canada, the English part of Canada, would be more British, more conservative, more, we want to preserve things. You mentioned something important, Peyman. You were asking yourself, what is the definition of the word conservative? And I was expecting that the rest of Canada would be at least different. And with what happened this week in BC, I'm shocked, because I tell myself, where do we preserve life in Canada? Outside the fact that we can talk about demography, outside the fact that we have a huge immigration to compensate for a low birth rate, how do we even preserve life, especially the life of children? We can talk about MAID, but MAID, if it touches older people, I will not debate on this because I'm against it. But if it touch older people and they want to do it, let's say we're a free country, but when it start to attack children, castrating, mutilating children, and I think JT mentioned castrating and mutilating children. Men are castrated today. Psychologically, ideologically, we are afraid to speak, because every time we will speak about something that is controversial, we will be accused of being transphobe, homophobe, misogynist, and people, they censor themselves. They forget that in a democratic society, we have to confront ideas. Else, it becomes a dictatorship. And Tim mentioned the Gulag. People are afraid. We have to break this fear. It's the only thing that can help us break the fear of people and avoid this retaliation or this punishment all the time.
Go ahead, Peyman.
I just want to push back on something André said. He said, if we don't debate ideas in a democracy, it turns into a dictatorship. I've lived in a dictatorship. They had more common sense than Canada. So it's not the right word to use.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. C.H. Douglas brought up an interesting comment about the state. We've mentioned the issue with the state. And the state is our state and should serve our common interests. Does this exist anymore? Either of you?
Go ahead, André.
No, it does not exist. But what will replace, or what has already replaced it? Maybe that's a question. We can debate about it, but what do you think, Peyman?
I think I read the question. The state does exist, but you could think of the state as like a corporation. It's almost external. It's like an occupying force. It doesn't have any of our interests in mind, and we've lost control of it. It's a life unto itself. It's like an AI that's achieved sentience.
Yeah. So I'd mentioned before, that basically wherever I go from here, I'm going to end up getting political. As much as we are told that there does not appear to be another political solution, because, well, you look at the largest conservative party of Canada, the largest conservative body of legislation and political entity, and they are clearly left-leaning. Clearly, if they're not out and out in bed with the Liberals, they are at the very least in collusion, down to the last man, because Tumblr just happened, and who in the Conservative Party has spoken up? There are 122 of them. Who in the Federal Conservative Party of Canada in British Columbia has spoken up? And there are 43 federal MPs in British Columbia. Who has spoken up? And so the silence is the issue. So they're either told, keep your fool mouth shut because we don't have the narrative sorted out yet. And we can see that they're struggling with it, because look at the police. Look at how they've reported it, right? The perpetrator, the shooter, a female, and it's astonishing. The RCMP report that I linked in my article doesn't even identify the sex of the children who were, right? Like, willing to throw innocent people to the wolves, not even an under the bus reference, to the wolves, in order to protect their precious sexual orientation and gender ideology indoctrination. This is lunacy. This is lunacy. And there are going to be people who will stand up to this. I mean, anything I say after this is incitement, right? Because this must stop. It must stop.
You have some movement, when we think about the Freedom Convoy, and there was this million people for family. That was a march. I think it was in 2023, and they did it another year in 2024. People, they go and walk on the street, and they promote the family. It was very popular for 2 years. I think it was in Ottawa, and it was in some major city in Canada. And after that, it started to fade slowly, because I have the feeling that people, they are involved, especially families, they are involved. But then when they see that there's a pushback, they feel secure. And you mentioned, Tim, the way the mainstream media and the police, how they manage the event. They were just pushing back, because they were having angry people saying, it is not a woman, it is a man, it is not a person, it is a man. And they were focusing, and they had to change their narrative. That's the first point. The second point, you were mentioning, I'm sorry again to refer to her, Rachel Gilmore. There's a lot of people on alternative media, because we can do, the trial of mainstream media, but alternative media also, they play this game. If we can avoid this, and if we can break those silos, because we don't own the truth. The truth is there. We all try to find it. Some, they will be more honest, some will be more opportunist, and sometimes you have to be opportunist. But if it is a movement, I think about all those alternative media who were sponsoring the Conservative Party of Canada, they're not helping. They're not helping. And I think there's a lot of people in Canada who will see it. How they will react, I hope that they will rise. You always refer to a grassroots movement. I hope they will rise, and if they will understand that it can touch them, and maybe go to the local school board and start to ask questions. Because we have this tendency in Canada of censoring ourselves, because we want to be kind, and we want to avoid conflict, but the conflict is here.
I just wanted to tie a couple of things together. I mentioned I grew up in a dictatorship. Let's say when I was in Iran, and if there was a war, some people would die over here, some civilians. When the police go in, or the paramedics could go in to help, their main concern is addressing the loss of life and helping the victims. It's not to push an ideology. So they would say, like, Peyman's, I don't know, cousin died, Peyman's brother died, something like that. They wouldn't say, like, Peyman's gender non-specific family member died. But here, that was their main concern, or at least it was one of their concerns. Like the RCMP commissioner officer, he should have said, no, like, go pound sand. You can fire me if you want to. You can take my pension. These people, they're grieving. I'm not going to do this. And also, Tim, you I think, or whatever, we're talking about the Conservative Party. I think what they're doing is they're listening to strategists out of Ottawa, and they're going to Pierre Poilievre, and they're saying, if you want to win and form government, you need the transgender vote, you need the urban vote, you need the immigrant vote, and they're not questioning this. Like, Pierre Poilievre is not considering that maybe this $300,000 a year strategist could be wrong. But I think that strategist is wrong. Canadians,
maybe the strategist is not wrong. Maybe he's saying exactly what he means to say.
To take the party, maybe. Yeah, anyway, that was my point.
Yeah. Peyman, you mentioned something, about this strategist. Morally, where are we? Morally, today, our Canadian society, where are we? butchering our children, and including this young man who was on the heavy medication for many years. This is
decay. Moral decay of this nation started back in the 70s, right? Moral decay started with, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, treating government like it was his plaything, disrespecting the institutions that existed before him, creating new institutions that were more of his design, intended to bring about his vision of the world for Canada. And in order to do that, you permit decay because you give people distractions, right? This is bread and circuses, but on a more sophisticated level. Over time, Canada has degraded spiritually, morally, culturally, traditionally into a more and more. America talks about the melting pot, right? And Canada brags up and down about the mosaic, right? This beautiful mosaic, stained glass window architecture and whatnot. Yeah, but all the glass pieces stayed where they were put, right? It's what our governments prior to us moving into the 80s intentionally did was keep us under economic and political pressure in order to continue to water down the legislation, to water down the bureaucratic layer. And then by the time you get out of the recession of the mid 80s, you crank up the bourgeois, right? You crank up the decadence. And when I was a teenager, we laughed at the whole bougie concept, right? We laugh about the bougie concept, but then I get into the early 2000s and I'm as bougie as the next guy, right? Gen X is a perfect example of the rot that steps in. We go from being trustworthy enough to not come home until the lights come on the street lights, saying we're not going to take it. And now here we are in COVID, absolutely taking it. And a big enough chunk of the Gen X generation are actually the ones writing these laws, pushing these legislations, creating this bureaucracy, and forcing this garbage down our children's throat, and keeping parents distracted by making sure that they're never above water enough to pay attention to their own children. So it's an assault from all sides. And I know that's a grandiose way to do it, a grandiose way to describe it, but it's a fact. And we no longer seem to have enough bodies in the family structure, and by that I mean parent, child, grandparent, or parent, child, cousin, uncle, right? No longer have enough of this close structure to buffet against the pressure of an economy and a legislative system and a media that is hell bent on messing with our children and making us feel like we're bad parents because we're not bending over to the emotional social learning program and all these other abbreviations that are being rammed down our throats because we're just bad parents if we don't do this. This has to stop. So we have absolutely been degrading over through my entire life. Canada has absolutely degraded, but it's only until COVID that enough of the right said, what the hell is actually going on, right? And now here we are 3 years, right? It is today, wasn't it? Today, isn't it?
today.
February,
Today.
right? Valentine's Day, 2022 was the War Measures Act.
4
We are
years.
3 years. 4?
4 years.
4 years. Sorry. We are 4-year anniversary. And what have we learned? Nothing. Culturally, like as a people, right? Now there are individuals who've done amazing things, small groups who've done exceptional things. Peyman working tirelessly to connect with other people to share this message. Us creating this podcast in order to to be a bunch of angry middle-aged white men, except Peyman's not white, right? So, but all these things
I'm not middle-aged, okay?
You don't look a day over 65. All these efforts, and truth be told, I'm just a talking head, right? I'm just so aside from me being involved at the political level with the People's Party for 7 years, and doing, the things I helped to do with that. Those days are behind me now. What's next? Right. And then Tumblr happens, right? And then something else happens, and then something else happens. The country is so big that we just throw up our hands, right? We just throw up our hands. Oh, it's too big. And yeah, it's too big. So act local. I can always come back to that. Your family first, act local. There are 4,500 municipalities in Canada. End of rant. Sorry, Peyman.
Payment.
Yeah, what you described with the lack of uncles, cousins, grandparents, they're still there, but it's been outsourced to the government. So and it doesn't work like that. The relationship you get from your actual family is you cannot compare it to like the zoning department at municipal hall. So if you have a grandfather that tells you this is how you build a house, if you transfer that to zoning, it doesn't have the same value. Same thing with education. Not that they teach you this, but if they taught you fishing, it's not the same thing as learning it from your cousins. Sex, learning about where babies come from school is not the same thing as learning it from your cousins or uncles. Well, not uncles, but you get where I'm going with that.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as what they did with wives. Women, they're now married to the state, but they're not getting the same emotional fulfillment.
Well, Payment, you mentioned something, education. For example, take sexual education. What they're pushing today for very, very young children, which is a way to control them from the outside. It's not true that the child can. Children, they don't have any sexuality. It does not exist until the teenage, when hormone kicks in. This is a construct. It has nothing rational, especially when you destroy children that are vulnerable. They are vulnerable, and you can manipulate them. That's why marketing strategies, they always target children. You were mentioning the family and the structure. It's there, but we don't see it. You interviewed a lot of people. Do you have this feeling that family are hopeless today? Toward what is happening?
Yeah. I mean, like I talked to Emily Dugan, who ran for school board, and she said of all of her friends, like her family was the only one that was a 2-parent household. So the one single parent household is a big issue. During the election, I noticed there was a lot of resentment amongst the baby boomer generation. So like 85, 90, I think their families just abandoned them into these old person homes. And then now vice versa, they're bitter and they're pursuing policies that are hurting their grandchildren. But even beyond that, when I came here in the 90s, I sensed it then too. It's the erosion of parental rights, and the liberals, specifically liberal women, but liberals, they're very sneaky the way that they erode parental rights. They would say Scandinavia, they don't have corporal punishment, and their kids are happier. Their kids are committing less crimes. Therefore, we should not have corporal punishment. So you can't outlaw. So they've outlawed corporal punishment, which is a erosion of parental rights. I mean, let's be honest, like 50% of the fun of being a parent is beating your kids. Why else have children?
Oh, that just got us demonetized.
Well, I would say, punishing make a difference. And you mentioned Scandinavia, you mentioned those countries. This is not true what they're promoting all the time, because the fact that you forbid people to correct your child, I'm not talking about violence. I'm talking about correction. And look at teenagers today. Now in South Shore of Montreal, you have riots practically every day near high school, and they arrive with guns and knives. 13 years old. Like I mentioned this week, we had a discussion with David Garner, and I told him, I said, it was last year, 2 years ago, 2 young children, 2 young teenagers, 13 years old. They left Montreal in a car, and they went to Sherbrooke, where is the headquarter of the Hells Angel, and they attacked the headquarter of the Hells Angel with Kalashnikov. 13 years old. One was shot dead. And after that, the mother, a single mother, she started to complain that her poor child was murdered. I said, your child was 13 with a Kalashnikov attacking criminal gang. And when you just look at those events, and if we saw what happened this week, we see them. They have a huge cover. We cover this because it's a tragedy, and it is. But people, we live in a virtual reality. Those family, it is not virtual; it is real. They will be changed forever. And we, as a society, we have a duty not only to support them, but to make sure that this will not happen again. And this is where I see that politicians, they fail miserably. They never question the real motivation of those events. Because, like I think Tim mentioned, they are part of it. Maybe if we want to be a mature society, they have to address the problem. They are paid for it in the parliament.
So where do you think we are moving forward, Peyman?
I'll share my thoughts with you after regarding Tumblr. But I think this has a lot to do with what's going on in the US. I think the Democrat Party is influencing the Liberal Party up here. That includes the Conservative Party of Canada, which is a department of the Liberal Party. And I think the CIA is getting involved with the Alberta independence thing. So Canada is being run by the liberal, leftist, progressive. They will unleash their Antifa and the child soldiers Andre was talking about. And I think they're going to try to cause as much chaos here as possible. I don't have very much hope for Canada, to be honest. I think the Alberta independence thing is actually going to go through, and that's going to change everything.
Andre?
I agree with Peyman. And I would advise people, if it is possible, stay rational. I think Peyman, he made a comment today in Telegram. And he said, "Oh, I'm overwhelmed, blah, blah, blah." And I said, young man, if you are mature, young man, maybe not that young, but still he's young, strong man. But I see it, a little bit of gray here.
He's earned his gray. He's earned his gray.
It's dust. It's dusty over here.
Yes, but the gray, it is a feeling of maturity. And I've now I know you since practically 2 years, and I've seen that Peyman, you change. We all change, but maturity, and I see that your style has changed. And this is maybe my advice for people. When you're 20 years old, you cannot be mature. You can be energetic. You can challenge. It is interesting. You need wisdom. You need somebody who will guide you, help you, especially when you're a child. And my advice is simple. If in a situation of crisis, you have to act in a mature way. You cannot be hysteric, if I can use the expression. And this is what I try to do, and especially toward alternative media. We are including myself, we are very fast to react. I say we have two ears and one tongue. We should listen 2 times more than we speak, especially for me.
AT brought up an interesting point, and that is you permit decay but project it as progress. And that pretty much sums up Canada over the last 40, 50 years. And that you look at Trudeau Sr. all the way down to Trudeau Jr., and you watch this slow progressive decay economically, legally, culturally, right? And socially. And now that, Trudeau has served his purpose, so to speak, they're bringing in Carney for the the killing blow, and Pierre is right there alongside of him. And so, if we find ourselves, quote unquote, in Babylon, how are we going to make our way forward? And I think that continues to come back, always comes back to strengthen your family, strengthen your family, strengthen your family. Sort that shit out, strengthen your family, because that's ultimately what they're coming for. Because it's Brave New World, where children are born in a vat, right? And everybody is expected to be promiscuous, and everybody has Ativan on demand in their pocket. This is the culture they're moving toward, and we have to find a way to push back on that with everything we've got. So,
I just want to.
anybody
I
have
want to
any?
put a.
Mhm.
Sorry, I just want to add a message of hope on top of your message of hope. Uh, it seems like we're making no progress. You know, we got our asses kicked in Ottawa. It's been 4 years, and it seems like there's no progress. But that's only because we've spent 4 years building the foundation. What 4 years ago we were all children. We had no idea
Mm.
about any of this stuff. Conservatism, the state, Westminster style of government. We spent 4 years sacrificing all along, building up this sort of like infrastructure, maybe not physical, but the knowledge
Knowledge.
infrastructure.
Mm.
And we saw it sort of come to fruition after the Conservative Party convention, where people said this is not right. And with the tragedy in Tumblr, I think people are starting to say, no, we need to go back to something that was more normal. So it's not all a loss. We are making wins.
Andre?
Yes, it's a message of hope. I can refer to the mainstream media again. Because I disconnected myself in 1994, I was out of the scope until 2024. I was not on social media. And when I wanted to run for the People's Party, I said, okay, I will create an account. And I understood my mistake, that I was so disconnected from mainstream media and alternative media that my perception of reality was biased also. And why I say this, it's because now I've seen the value of maybe the future of communication, but not only communication, the fact that we can build relationship. Alternative media will create an opportunity. It is not perfect. Peyman mentioned something very important. 4 years ago, we were all blind, including myself. Where I advise people to, and we saw it with how they covered the event in BC this week, how they lied, and we know this, but now it's becoming more and more evident. And people, I think that's why they were so angry, because after the convention of the Conservative Party, Bill C4, I think a lot of people were angry, and then arrived this tragedy. It's time for those people to look at their environment, where they are in terms of information, and what are their values, and say, okay, I can rely on what? Tim, you always mention, family, local relationship. This is important. Structure this, make it safe. Start with this and build foundation. And Peyman mentioned something very important. It takes time to build foundation. Maybe we will see the light at the end of the tunnel. It will come. I have hope, because we're talking about it.
I believe it is. Yeah, it's interesting how February has turned into a really horrible month for the Soji ideology, because here on the right, we're finally realizing that the Conservative Party Canada is absolutely in support of, right, Soji indoctrination. They've proven it again. And then Tumblr happens, and we watch all parties peddle this narrative that tries to detract from the cause of the incident. and then reframing it intentionally. And we can see it, it's right in front of us, how they're changing words. This is 1984, right? We're using the small dictionary now. We're intentionally changing the meaning of words. And you and I, and we are going to be guilty of wrong think if we speak out, against the actual source of the problem. The way forward is to confront. Always, it is when it's appropriate. I'm not saying you just go out and protest all day long, but that you have to confront the people who you've hired to represent you and say, what's going on? Why are you doing this? You are paid to represent me, not the ideology. Get your stuff sorted out, or we will find a way to replace you. There are 40 million of us, right? There's only 10, 20,000 of them.
I have no follow up.
Mm-hmm. But what about your next move? Collectively, it's not only about podcast. We are evolving. We are thinking. 2, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, we were not talking about it. Now think about what happened 2 years ago. The Bud Light effect, the DEI ideology that started to collapse. It's because they hit a wall, and the strong wall of you sell Bud Light by a transgender woman, and the sale dropped 80%.
Can I comment on that?
Yes, of
Glenn
course.
Beck pointed out exactly what their miscalculation was, because it was really easy for somebody to say, I want a Miller Lite. People, they're very lazy. They don't want to get involved.
Yeah.
But with the Bud Light thing, they're like, all I have to do is just do what I did before, but pick a different beer.
Well, that's why I refer to the Bud Light effect. I think what happened in BC this week is an effect. It is an effect that will crack the hardcore of the ideology. It will crack it. It cannot be sustained because it's not based on life. It's based on lie. And we can ask ourselves, what is life and what is a lie? And it will arrive. That's maybe the message of hope. People must not despair. And I want to go back to the family. This is maybe our message, or at least my message. We think of you.
I'll tell a story. I went for coffee this morning, and the barista said, well, what are you up to today? This is about 9 o'clock this morning. And I said, well, actually, I'm on my way to getting ready to do my Saturday podcast. Oh, she said, well, what will you be talking about? And she's a college age girl taking law. And I said, we're going to be talking about Tumbler Ridge. She went, oh, she said, we talked about the professor, talked about it because he's in second year university, I think. So we were talking about that with the professor, and he was all saying, trying to avoid using, the boy's gender and I said, but he's a boy, right? And so she's identifying in class out loud the truth. She's saying, but you can't, because the professor is giving the narrative, which is reinforcement, right? Before the young people start thinking for themselves, right? The college age the professor has to reinforce and reinforce that, corral them back in so they don't. And she's like, no, that's wrong. He's a boy. You can't say he's a female. You can't say he's a woman, a female in a dress. And she's challenging it out loud among the rest of the class. And the teacher shuts her down by saying, Lord, are you a transphobe? And she immediately has to shut down because there's 30 other kids in class. So that system exists and it's well enforced.
Well, what you mentioned, at least you have some individual in the young generation.
Yes.
They're starting to challenge the narrative. It is not about being disrespectful toward the institution. It is challenging a lie. And this is important. This is where I have hope, because I see many young people, they see what is happening to their friends. they see, they're 16, 17, they see what is happening. And I'm pretty sure they don't talk a lot about it, but they see shit. I avoided that because maybe I have a more stable family. There's a lot of family who are in danger because their structure is not stable, because a single parent, or economically it's difficult. It's hard to raise children when they're teenager and they're surrounded by this type of ideology. But I see hope, because you see a lot of young adult, they're starting to challenge the indoctrination in college and university. It will come. Maybe it will not come from people my generation, because first of all, they don't trust. I'm a boomer. They don't trust boomers. but even if I'm wise, they don't trust me. They will trust their friends, and they will see, and they will say, wait, we do not agree with this. I see hope.
Well, Peyman?
Yeah,
All
one
yours.
final thing. This self-censorship, where you can't say what gender the perpetrator was. This is an extension of the anti-racism, where you couldn't say what race it was. A man wearing a white T-shirt. Yeah, but is it a black guy? Is it a Middle Eastern guy? Is it a white guy? You
Yeah.
couldn't say it because it was insensitive, and now they're extending it to gender.
Well, the idea of transhumanism is to remove all barriers, all characteristic. No black, no white, no man, no women. It's more easy after that to control people.
Squirrel Nuts raised an interesting point here on the side. We've heard this quite a lot in the last couple of years. The ones pushing us are scared because there has actually been enough visible pushback. The convoy is a very obvious example of that. The men and women, like I've mentioned, Amy Ham, etc., who have made very visible, capable pushback. Right. So it's the idea is we are capable of pushing back, and if all they really have left is these skirmishes. Now, grant you, that's probably a very terrible way to describe that. But if they're creating conflict on small localized levels in an attempt to push us either down or over the edge so that they can label us as terrorists and then deal with us once and for all.
Can I comment on that? That they're scared, but they're scared of losing. They're not guilty as sin. They're not worried that the jig is up and people realize that they did something wrong. They think they did what they're doing is right. I go back to that Truth and Integrity Commissioner, that horrible, horrific post that she put out, where she spent like a couple of seconds on the family and then started attacking cis men. Like, she believes this ideology. And unfortunately, they have tools at their disposal. One of those is an election. If they call an election, everybody loses their mind and they just snap right back behind their team colors.
And I think I've said everything I need to say today. Andre?
I can just conclude on this. I hope the discussion that we had today, Peyman, you, Tim, and me, and I, will help not only Canadians, but would help also the family, if they ever listen, to understand that we are concerned, and that it is part of our memory now. It is not something that will disappear tomorrow. So I hope the conversation will help people at least calm down and maybe think about all the victims.
Peyman has a comment he makes sometimes. It says, hug your children. It seems more appropriate now than it did in times past. If you have anything else, Peyman?
No. It was, I guess, sympathies to the families of the fallen children.
Thank you for joining us today. It was a pleasure spending time with you. And this is us signing off. Until next week. Have a good day.
Do you know how to sign off?